Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today in studio, Associate Editor Joel Stocksdale.
Hey, everybody.
What's going on, man?
Not as much. Just been enjoying the fantastic weather this week.
It is pretty nice here. It's fall in Michigan. It's pretty good. Senior Editor for Autoblog Green, John Snyder. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? I think it's unseasonably warm, and I wish it would cool down.
It was 55 degrees this morning, which is nice.
Yeah, this morning was nice. Yeah, but
it's a little warm.
It was in the
for my
80s
taste.
this week, which
It was
crazy.
86 on Sunday. Yeah, this is the time of year you want it to be like 58, 59 in the morning, maybe hit 70 later in the day, then cool back down.
That's pretty much exactly today, and it's sunny out.
So no complaints, I guess. And we also have no complaints because we've been driving lots of awesome press cars, testing them out, so you don't have to, and so we can tell the world what we think. The lineup today is pretty good. We've got the Amg GT 63S, which is quite the specimen, Fiat 124, Lexus GX if you're into some old school luxury SUVs, and we'll talk a little bit on the Lincoln Nautilus as well. We're going to talk all reviews today, but we will spend your money as we get out the door for this weekend. So let's jump right in. The AMG GTS is quite the machine. The one we had was bright red. It showed up, and I mean, it got a lot of attention. Let's put it that way. The sticker was $189,360, so almost $190,000. That'll get you a pretty decent house in some parts of the area. Really impressive car. 630 horsepower, 664 pound-feet of torque. This is the V8 bi-turbo handcrafted AMG engine. Interior I thought was stunning. It's a big car. It handles pretty well despite that, but it is a big car. The spoiler on the back I think is borderline cartoonish. Little something I wouldn't really expect from AMG, but still, really it affects that look of like German muscle car. Joel, I know you drove in. I think you had it last weekend. You're going to write a review on it. Mm-hmm. How'd you feel about it?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting car. And also I want to point out that this is the four-door AMG GT. This is not the coupe. And it's the 63S, so it's the top range, 630 horse, and it's all-wheel drive. It's just absurd. Just looking at it's huge. The fenders are bulging. It's the wing on the back. That's actually an option, so you don't have to have that if you don't want.
I think I would take it just because, even though it's so crazy, but I think I like it.
Yeah, and this was bright, like, oh God, I'm blanking on the word. Anyway,
crimson, maybe, or
yeah, it's just bright red.
It's called Jupiter. Oh wait, Jupiter red. That's badass.
Yeah. I'd buy that, sure.
And I think it looks really good in a bright color, because most of the photos I see of it are like in kind of these dark, kind of blah colors, but it really pops in a bright color. And I got attention everywhere. I got it from a guy in the drive-thru. I was parked at a gas station, and a guy got his phone out and was taking pictures of it. This thing attracts attention. And driving it, it feels like it's meant for the track, despite the fact that it's a big four-door and has a lot of cargo space. It has a very stiff ride. It kind of feels a little busy, like you're kind of always being bumped around a little bit. It's got monstrous grip. You turn it anywhere, and it just sticks and goes. Even with all that power, like just between the all-wheel drive, the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires,
nice.
It doesn't let go, and like despite it being heavy and huge, it is pretty confidence-inspiring. I mean, it's got all that grip. The steering actually has a decent amount of feedback, and the engine is so powerful, and it's one of these things where it's almost too capable and too fast to have much fun on public roads, because going like 70 miles an hour feels like you're doing 35. It makes normal speeds feel brutally slow.
It's pretty ridiculous. It's yeah, I mean it's definitely a car that would feel at home. I think on maybe a track like Monticello, it's sort of like a course that you get some room to run, but it also certainly would be good in the corners. I mean, to your point, Joel, this thing is crazy looking. It's so stunning. People, when I was driving it around, I took it to lunch, and people were like, I mean, you would pull up to a stoplight, and cars on both sides of you would look at you like, what is that thing? Not only is it, I think, an impressive just car in its own right, I think, you know, you see the Mercedes badge on it, you're not quite sure what to do with that, because Mercedes tend to look a little more austere, a little more buttoned down. Yes, their styling's a little, you know, out there these days, more demonstrative.
But it's a known quantity, basically. You know, up until, you know, they started making these cars, and they're still so rare to see on the road, you know?
Yeah, this is one, too, where when we saw it, I want to say Geneva, we saw this, we saw the concept. I remember, you know, all the editors were super fired up about it. And I think it actually delivers more in real life with the dynamics, with the powertrain, and with the looks than even at the time. I think at the time we were all a little skeptical. We're like, well, what is this four-door GT? Like, they already have multiple things that could sort of fit this bill. For a while, I didn't fully understand the premise of having AMG as its own sort of sub-brand car company. Like, it seemed like just make it, you know, an E63. You know, what is this AMG makes its own cars sort of thing? Some of it's semantics, but yeah, I mean, when you actually drive it, man, this is awesome.
Yeah, and something that was funny about it, I didn't really like it at first because I got in it and I was just like, wow, this like grips so much and it accelerates so fast and like it goes so fast. Like I can't have any fun with this on the road. But after a while, and weirdly, it's the stuff that makes it not as comfortable that I think makes me like it more. Like the fact that it's a little bit jittery and bumpy, and the fact that like just a little bit of turning on the steering wheel sends it darting toward one side. A lot of that stuff kind of gives it some character that I think it really needs. Like most of the time this car is going to be driven on public roads, and you can't take advantage of that performance. So it needs a little something to kind of communicate to you that like, oh, this is cool and fun and different. And the fact that it is a little bit rough around the edges in some spots, I think helps with that.
And I think that's a great point too, that a lot of the use cases for this is going to be perhaps like the country club or, you know, professional athletes. I could see driving this car too, you know, people who, you know, you go pitch for the Tigers, I don't know, then take your AMG GT home and, you know, they're not going to get the most out of it. I mean, we probably didn't get them. We didn't get the most out of it.
Absolutely not. No, I know that it had way more to give.
So it's quite the car.
Yeah. And the one other thing that I still have a little bit of hard time getting my head around is what would be the reason to buy this over the two-door AMG GT Coupe? Because this is very clearly like meant to be a track car. Granted, this is the 63S. There are lower trims that are probably a little less hardcore. But
well, the answer is clear. It's so you're the most badass dad dropping the kid off in preschool.
I really wanted to take this car to my kid's school after I drove it. I ended up driving a couple other things, but I like the car seat would have fit back there. I gave up on it too soon. I should have done that.
Because the thing that's always in the back of my mind, it's like for kind of similar money, you could buy the AMG GT-R, the two-door, and have a more capable track machine that you can still drive home. Granted, that's also kind of rough to drive home, but I mean, so is this four-door. But you've also got a lot less car, and it looks more like a sports car. So I guess the one thing I don't totally get who is going to buy this, especially when, like you said, there are a bunch of other really fast Mercedes sedans out there that are way more comfortable to take around town. So I don't know. I guess I have a hard time seeing like what the business case is for this, but I still really like it.
Yeah, me too. That totally sums it up. Don't quite get the overall strategy for it, but sometimes car companies are doing things these days that don't quite fit into these neat buckets.
Yeah, as long as there's enough people buying it to justify its existence, I'm glad it's here.
Exactly. And I would take it over the two-door GT. I've driven the two-door GT a few times, and that's a cool car. I really like that. I think it does a lot for Mercedes. I think they need to have something like that. But this to me is just so like, it does have more of a presence. It's a bigger car. I'm totally biased. I like sedans more than like, the smaller sporting things. But this to me really blew me away.
Yeah, I will say one thing that I do like a lot better about this sedan than the coupe is the visibility is way, way better. The visibility out of the two-door GT is awful. Like, the roof is really low, and, like, all the sills are really high, and you've got this super, super long hood.
Yeah.
Like, it's got terrible visibility. The sedan is a whole lot easier to see out of and to maneuver.
I think, too, and the back seat's somewhat respectable.
It's
a four-seater.
It's got loads of cargo space. That hatch is huge.
Yeah, that hatch is amazing. I love that kind of fastback roof line. I don't know. This kind of matches up against some of the really high-end Panameras. I like this better than the Panameras. Like, the different, versions of them. To me, this feels special in a way the Panamera tries to and somewhat succeeds with. I feel like this, like, slam dunk does succeed.
I think a big part of it is it's got way more presence from the outside. The Panamera is, well, really all Porsches, to be honest, they don't really have much in the way of visual flair unless it's like a GT3 RS with crazy wings. They're all kind of demure. And this AMG, like, kind of shouts about itself a little bit.
Those wheels. Like, we pulled up into the office at the same time Tuesday, whatever this was. I was like, how big are those wheels? They were like 21s with 10, 12 spokes, something like that. Crazy.
Yeah. Really low offset, too, so they stick out really far. They've got, like, really deep spokes.
Cross spoke wheels with gray accents. Yeah, they were awesome. Anything else we should talk about this car? I think we liked it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So let's move along to the Lexus GX. We all drove this one. John, why don't you kind of take us through it? What I think kind of got me fired up about this is I like how it's just an old school SUV.
Yeah.
I wrote about that in my driver's notes. Normally we try to hone in on like one point, like interior, exterior, design, infotainment. And I'm like, humor me. I'm going to write about the ethos, which is super nebulous.
Yeah.
But you and I had this conversation the other morning. We're like, this thing's good. Now, it's got some shortcomings, like that infotainment system from 1978. Not great, Bob. And it's that motor does what it's supposed to do, but I think it could use a little more power, But I think you and I fell in the same area where we do generally like this thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was surprised too that I liked it, but it just feels kind of old school. Like it feels, frankly, kind of ancient. But all the things are good. Like I love the switch gear. I love the styling, the interior styling. Even the graphics on the dash. It's hard to describe, but to show where the gear lever is, it's got like like a cutout of the path of the gear shifter to show you where it is, and it doesn't say like P or R N D L or anything like that. It just shows you where on this squiggle it is,
and it's really low resolution,
really low,
black and white.
Yeah, dot matrix feels like one of those handheld games from the 90s,
yeah,
and
like your like Texas Instruments graphing calculator from high school.
And
which hasn't changed in forever either.
Yeah, and something about that's just cool. It works. It's an aesthetic that somehow still works. I don't know if it would begin to wear on me after living with it for a year. I'd be like, okay, yeah, the retro vibe is like sort of worn off on me. But I really liked it for the time we had it.
I think too the suspension on there, it was called kinetic dynamic something. It's hard enough to say in general, but with a cold, it's even harder. But to me, that really smoothed out the ride as opposed to, say, the Land Cruiser, which the Land Cruiser, man, that thing really feels like an old school SUV. This, I think, you get a little bit more of a modern vibe. I think the steering is, I would say, pretty light. But for such a big vehicle, it does sort of direct you where you want it to go. And I like that there's all that, like, you got to do all this work to steer the thing. That's kind of cool to me.
Yeah, it was kind of fun, diving into corners and like, jamming on the accelerator and cranking in some lock on it.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah,
I did not have that kind of confidence with that thing at all.
I thought it was kind of playful, but again, like, I grew up, my dad drove the Land Cruiser and then the LX, and this feels, sort of like that. So it's a familiar thing, especially since I've driven this car before. It hasn't changed in years and years and years. It feels instantly familiar when you get inside of it. So I was able to, have some confidence and have some fun with it. But yeah, the suspension's really good. It's got, settings like comfort, normal, and sport. I left it in sport. Sport's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a squishy suspension on its own, but in sport it feels just right. Put in comfort, and there's a little bit of squat and dive, and I put it in comfort for a little while and was like, screw this. I was in a traffic jam and was like, man, this is a little uncomfortable. So just popped it back into the sport. The sport's perfectly comfortable on its own.
What impressed me about this was just the overall level of comfort and smoothness and refinement. The cabin is darn near silent. The engine is buttery smooth, and it makes almost no noise, at least from what I could tell from the inside.
Mm.
Even getting on it hard, it was still just this very quiet, a little bit of a hum from under the hood. And the ride is super soft. And importantly, the whole body feels very stiff. Like I wasn't getting any like creaking or flexing really.
Yeah.
It just felt rock solid.
Well built.
Like cruised right over all the bumps and stuff. It was just extremely smooth and quiet and kind of just a relaxing place to be at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's how I would totally echo that. This to me is almost like the weather. We were talking about the weather. It's almost too nice for this. I kind of like a car like this in like November or even in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Turn up the seat heaters, you got good road view. Yeah, I mean, you just feel secure. It's like a rolling fortress. One thing I thought was I didn't like was I put my kid's rear-facing car seat in, and I had to move the seat up quite a bit in the front.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised there wasn't more room in the second row.
And the third row's tiny.
Yeah.
But
yeah. If that was the Land Cruiser, you'd probably, just have that open cargo area.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a much smaller SUV than the Land Cruiser and the LX.
True.
And actually, I like the size. Like when I was driving around, like it's fairly narrow and it's not very long, so it's actually really easy to maneuver around town.
But
yeah, go ahead, John.
That third row, I drove it home. Well, first when I pulled up, my wife Kat popped out the door and was like, "Whoa, that's really pretty. Can I get one?" And then she remembered that the fuel economy. Let's see, it's
not
15 city, 18 highway, 16 combined. So that's an instant no.
That's like 18 on the highway is almost mind-numbing.
It's
like
pretty
wow,
bad.
horrible.
But
I mean, that's the flip side of all this retro goodness is that it also performs like it did 10 years ago or so.
Exactly.
But then Wally popped out the door behind her, my 4-year-old, and he was equally in love with the car and just instantly was like crawling all over it. And the third row seats, they're electrical. They fold up and they sort of do this transformer move where the seat cushion slides forward while the seat back pops up. It's actually not the best use of space back there because I mean it's not completely flat, but it is sort of a cool party trick. The way these things pop up and pop down, it's pretty slick.
I like how the rear door swings open. I think that's pretty neat. Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say one of our senior editors, consumer editor, Jeremy Korsdewski, his wife got a used one of these.
Nice.
I may be mixing up my Lexus SUVs though.
Yeah, they've got a GX.
Do they?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, it's I mean, especially here's the thing. let's say you're not going to do a lot of highway trips with these. Maybe you go camping a couple times a year and just whatever, you pay more to drive up north or something. Just for around town, 16 is not great, but it's a big gas tank. It's whatever. It's a good car to kind of motor around town in. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a kind of candy store goodness to this type of vehicle.
Well, this is the kind of thing, this is the kind of vehicle that I think would be phenomenal as like a plug-in hybrid of some sort. Like,
Yeah.
if you just had enough battery to like get you around town every now and then, that would make a big difference. Because I mean, there are probably plenty of people that take these on long highway trips, but I mean, that would make a big difference, and it would make it a nice little commuter.
I think electrification would help us out a lot. I think, frankly, as you look at the Toyota/Lexus SUV lineup, there's a lot of dinosaurs still kind of roaming around that need some newer powertrains. And I think that's where you look at like, add some sort of like plug-in component, and suddenly you've got a much more viable vehicle. The flip side is these things are already pretty heavy. They're already pretty expensive. Like, what's this thing going to cost, if you add that to it? I think that's where you got to start to look at the business case and think, are consumers going to pay a little bit more for this? I would hope they might. I frankly would rather have a plug-in, version of this because, hey, you're maybe saving the world a little bit, hokey as it sounds. But
I feel like they'd have to redo it quite a bit to get to that point, and that would be a new generation to be able to fit like the battery in there without taking up even more of the seating space and cargo space.
Yeah, you would need to do something else with the transmission too, because these old torque converter transmissions, they're not efficient at all. I mean, like right off the bat, so much of that energy from the engine is just getting spun into the torque converter. It's not actually going to the wheels, and that's awful if you're using electric right off the bat.
And
well said. I ran out of oxygen, and you guys both just like took it from there.
And at that point, it's going to be a different car, and I don't know that it's going to have the same charm as this generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think we'll leave it there. This car is what it is: red meat and potatoes, that
sure.
sort of thing, and that's okay. Let's move along though to speaking of charm. This is where I think things get kind of tricky. The Fiat 124. The Fiata, as some people called it, somewhat derisively. I think it looks great. I didn't drive this one, but I've driven it before, and I've really enjoyed the charm as we speak of this car. I think it's a great thing for Fiat. I think the fact that it's somewhat Miata related under the skin is great for Fiat. It's okay from Mazda. I don't think people care about this as much as we like to make people think they care about it. Like the Supra, the Z4, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to jump down that rabbit hole. But I like this. It's a little bit longer than the Miata, this is, dangerous thought here. I kind of like that. Part of me sometimes thinks the Miata is a little too small. I like that this car has just got a little bit more to it. So, but what do you guys think?
Well, I disagree with you on the styling front. I think it's good that the Miata is tiny.
Good.
And I mean, as a Miata guy though, I really, really like the 124 Spider a lot. And a big part of that is the Fiat engine under the hood. I mean, everything else is Mazda except for that engine. And the big part of that engine is the exhaust. The Abarth one that we've got, I think it's called like the Record Monza exhaust or whatever. And it's so loud. It's wonderful. I love it. It's got this nasty, growly, gritty, rumble right when you start it up.
Did you drive this at Laguna Seca?
I did, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's great there. And it's super predictable. Like this and the Miata. I mean, there's a lot about them that are interchangeable. It's super predictable. You can tell which ends have grip and which don't. The steering is very delicate and light and super precise. It's just a very easy, light car to drive around fast. Having the torque from the turbo is nice, and it's a lot more forgiving in that sense. Like if you're not quite in the right gear, that kind of helps cover up a little bit some of that, like being too low RPM or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I would pick the Miata over this pretty much any day of the week, except especially now that
Except for Saturday, then you take the Fiat one day.
Except now that the Miata has a little bit more power, it feels kind of all right. But this, like you say, with the turbo, it really does something for the character of this and for the drivability. But I mean, other than that, I'm sort of having trouble wrapping my head around this one, whether or not I like it.
What do you think of the styling?
The styling, I don't know. It's a little sort of blocky, and there's weird character lines and weird spots. And
see, I like all of that stuff, and I'll admit it's kind of weird. But when I like weird things about cars, it tends to be kind of like the weird stuff that almost nobody else likes.
Yeah,
but
I mean, my thing on the styling, I do like the Miata a little bit better on styling.
the Miata
I think
is beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's a more cohesive design.
Yeah.
And it's very taut and athletic.
I agree with you 100%.
There's nothing that hangs off anywhere weirdly. With the 124 Spider, I'm not a huge fan of the regular versions, but I really like the Abarth styling. I think the Abarth hits this good balance between like retro design and a little bit of like modern musculature. It's got like a more modern front bumper, and everything just looks a little bit beefier. I love the matte black stripe that you can get for it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I would agree with that too. I think it's one of those things too where like it's a bit of a cliche to be like, oh, hey, the top end, fastest version is the coolest one, but sometimes it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would also agree that the Miata has definitely a more holistic, athletic look, whereas I think the 124, it does look a little tacked on at times, but I also think that's okay because they had this idea of what an Italian sports car should be, and they had to make it different. Mm-hmm. So, that's just kind of how it goes. Yeah. I think there's more defining elements of some great Fiat Spiders that they had to kind of bake into this design, whereas the Miata has always been the Miata. And they're just like, well, how are we going to evolve it? Mm-hmm. Whereas Fiat's like, well, geez, when's the last time we did a Fiat sports car in the United States? We got to bring this great idea back. Mm-hmm. So I think it's okay.
There are a couple things about this that I noted about day-to-day usability. One was when I was, maneuvering in and out of parking spaces and turning the wheel, my fingertips kept hitting the windshield. It's just so close.
I've never run into that issue.
Yeah, I've never had that before in any other car, including the Miata.
Yeah, that's a weird sort of dash.
Yeah, but I also haven't had that issue in this car either yet.
One time while I was driving, well, this actually happened twice while I was driving down the highway. I like moved around in my seat a little bit and like barely tapped the seatbelt buckle with my fingertips, and the seatbelt popped right out. I found myself going 70 down the highway without a seatbelt, like trying to plug this back in, which was real weird. And then, the blind spot monitor, I kept getting false alerts when I was
I was running into that a little bit. I was getting some kind of it was a little oversensitive. It was, I think,
there'd be a car like a quarter mile back.
Yeah, or like 2 lanes over or something. And then again, I mean, it's better than not being sensitive enough.
I don't know, because then you learn to not believe it. It's like the blind spot monitor that cried wolf. You're just gonna ignore it at that point. And then one final little thing that this is just stupid John picking on it for whatever reason, but it's just I'm looking at the Monroney here. It says Spider, and then I see a scorpion next to it.
Oh, come on!
There's a lot of things that can kill you on this car here, but you know what? I think the Abarth logo is pretty awesome.
It is.
I mean,
it is really cool.
Every now and then you'll see somebody like rocking a sweatshirt with that logo, and you're like, oh, that's a real car person. They seek that out because, frankly, I think the 500 Abarth, it's an awesome car, but it's a little intense. Like my neighbor actually has one, and every time I'm like, oh, that dude likes cars.
Yeah.
He's got a jacked up Jeep that he takes off roading. So yeah, I mean, I guess long story short, it's a cool logo and people who actually spend their money on these types of cars, they're pretty legit, because you're making some compromises. They're rough.
Yeah,
let's
I
see.
do feel like this has a lot less compromise than the 500 Abarth, though, because like almost all of it is Mazda except the engine and the styling. So it feels like the interior is way higher quality, built way better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because like the 500 is kind of chintzy. I love it, but it's
No, you're totally right. As you first reported by Joel Stocksdale, the 500's gone after, when's it gone?
This is the last model year.
Last
Basically,
model
they're
year.
carrying over the 2019 models through 2020. Like they're just selling off all the last inventory.
Interesting. I mean, I think the 124, Fiat's wise to rip off Mazda's interior. Mazda's interiors are good. They're getting better. Yeah, steal it from them. They do it better than you. Most people do. Good move. But then if you're going to talk about like the engine and the styling, well, that's where you really get into the reasons people buy cars, specifically Italian cars. So, hell yeah, I think those are the parts that was wise for Fiat to focus on.
Yeah, it's actually strikes me as kind of what I think a lot of people would have preferred to see with the Supra and the Z4. Because, I mean, granted, the Fiat 124 is pretty much a Mazda, but it has a unique Fiat engine under the hood and like very, very unique stuff. The Supra at least got the styling right. But the fact that the Fiat also has its own unique engine that has its own unique character makes it different and makes it gives you a more compelling reason to maybe go with that over a Miata.
What actually kind of captures me about this car is I really like the idea of like the notion of an Italian sports car. I'm half Italian. I have driven a 1969 Alfa Romeo Spider. I actually got a ticket in it one time.
Nice.
It was nice. And the cop was like, "How fast were you going?" I'm like, "I don't know. The gauge is in kilometers and it's not working." So I don't know
Boy,
how fast you
that's
think.
really Italian car like classic
Right,
stuff right there.
right,
My
yeah.
speedometer's broken and it's the wrong
Right.
unit of measurement.
Yeah, good times, good memories. But so I totally buy into this notion of what this car could be. Actually, wasn't there a rumor this was going to be an Alfa?
Yeah, way back. The original plan was that Alfa Romeo was going to build a roadster off of the Miata. And somewhere along the line, I don't know, maybe they decided that it wasn't going to be like expensive and prestigious enough to be an Alfa. And so they're like, well, let's do it as a Fiat and we can bring back the 124.
I'm going to be honest. I think this might have worked better as an Alfa. Because I think,
I don't know. I mean,
I think an Alfa Roadster has a little more, I don't know.
It would have had to look
It's-
a lot different.
Yes,
a lot different.
right there.
yeah, I mean, the old Alphas, they definitely have more of like a pop culture significance. I mean, it was the like hero car in The Graduate.
Yep, exactly.
And I mean, but the thing is, I don't know. Just thinking of like how much they would have to do to like justify making like pricing it like an Alfa Romeo also and making it refined enough to be an Alfa Romeo. Like this is a really bare bones kind of noisy, uncouth roadster.
Did we mention the price on this yet? I don't think we did.
No.
The Abarth starts at $29,290 plus $14.95 destination charge. Ours with options came in at $35,165,
Mhm.
which I'm okay with.
I mean, the thing is,
Yeah.
like, a Miata Club or, like, even a Miata GT,
Yeah.
it gets up there, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, like, this, it's got the heated seats, it's got the limited slip diff in the rear, it's got the Brembo brake package, it's got a lot of stuff that brings up the price pretty quickly.
I think too, like, so the base Giulia starts at about like a little over 38, close to 39 actually.
Mhm.
I mean, you would have to actually basically bake in some costs to this car. Like you'd have to say, not only would you have to have like really get the Alfa design team on it and say, you got to dust off some amazing look from who knows when and make it work. I mean, yeah, you would have to find a way to get it to that premium feel. So I totally agree with that. I mean, and at that point, let's say this starts at, I don't know, let's say it starts at 35, which is still pretty, cheap for an Alfa, but
Mhm.
pretty expensive for like a starting price for something that's skeletally a Mazda Miata.
Mhm.
I mean, at that point, you're going to ask yourself, do I love how this car looks that much that I'm going to pay, I don't know, 10 grand more than an MX-5? I don't know. I mean, like, that's where you get guys like us are going to totally hammer on it and say, what's Alfa doing? They're adding this surcharge to this car when the Miata we actually think is better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think FCA did justice by it by making it a Fiat.
all right. So it's a Fiat. It's going to be a
Fiat.
Fiat. We'll
I'm
leave
good
it
with
there.
it being a Fiat. Yeah.
How about a Lincoln? That's definitely a Lincoln. The Nautilus.
Yeah, the Nautilus. Yeah, I drove it last night, and I having been in other Lincolns recently, I was looking forward to it. And this this was the black label. It has a nice interior, but and it's a really nice ride. But overall, it was almost dreadfully boring.
I mean, the thing is, the Nautilus, this is one of the last bastions of like old Lincoln.
Yeah.
This is because this thing has been around since pre-Continental, I think.
This is essentially what the MKX.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think
like
so.
reimagined, so to speak. But I mean, I think they got the exterior design right.
Yeah.
I mean, walking up to it in the parking lot, I'm like, okay, this fits in. It looks pretty good. Grill, I think Lincoln's doing some good things with its grill. But I'll agree with you, John. It was a little too sedate for
Yeah.
me driving. I mean, whatever. What do you expect? A mid-sized Lincoln crossover? I mean, yeah, I guess sort of. So it goes.
But I mean, apart from driving it, yeah, it was pretty nice. The interior's comfortable. Those seats are really, really supportive. The materials are wonderful. There's quite a bit of room when you're looking around in there. The rear seat is quite spacious. Some things like the buttons for the gear selection, which are on a vertical line on the left half of the center stack, I kept having trouble finding them. But I had the same problem in the Navigator, although that was completely different set out for the gear selectors. But I think Lincoln just needs to find a good place to put their gear selectors and and leave it at that. But the dash is like this nice big swath of curved leather. It's really, really attractive. I think both inside and out.
I think it's a pretty good value too. I mean, like this thing starts around 40-ish roughly.
Mm-hmm.
You could get some stuff on it. I mean, it's pretty well equipped at that price too. Loaded up. Like ours was, which one was this? The black label?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty loaded up. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is a vehicle in particular that's, helped by having that sort of, new Lincoln design ethos.
Yeah.
A more, not extreme, but a more demonstrative appearance. I will say this. Love the Aviator, love the Navigator, love the Continental, love those names. MKX was the one name that I think actually worked for them. I think MKS, come on, nobody knows what that was. MKT, forget about it. MKX, it's our crossover. Actually, yeah, that was the one that made a lot of sense. Nautilus is kind of awesome. I mean, it's totally straight out of Jules Verne. It sounds like a submarine.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I think the Lincoln MKX might have, just for what they're going for, this like subtle, refined crossover, that might have worked. I mean, which one would I pick? Give me the Nautilus, but still.
Yeah, I will defend Nautilus all day long. That's an excellent name.
Other Lincoln names that I like, the Lincoln Zephyr. They use that, I want to say, the 30s or 40s.
Well, and that was also their rebadged Ford Fusion.
It was. That was an okay car.
Yeah.
That was back in the era of true badge engineering. I mean, yeah, you were paying a lot of money for a Fusion to get the Zephyr.
To its credit, those early ones had a unique interior.
They did.
And like the dual cowl shape was kind of cool, kind of retro. But it was still It was a Fusion, and you could tell from the outside it was a Fusion.
Lincoln's, I think, in pretty good shape. I guess we'll do our requisite, like, we're testing a Lincoln. Let's talk about the State of the Union for Lincoln little thing.
Well,
I think they're in good shape.
They did just promote Kamal Kirik to head of design, and he worked on the Aviator, and he's been around Ford for a while. So I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, good move. Head over to Autoblog, check out that story. I think that's a really good point. Lincoln's been getting their design right. The trick now is how do you elevate them to a spot where like they're selling more vehicles and they're really becoming a true competitive luxury brand for Ford. Ford will tell you Lincoln's doing what we want it to. But then you look at the sales numbers, you look at like perceptions, and you could argue, they aren't as competitive as obviously some of the German brands.
Yeah, I think Lincoln is doing what they need to do. They're focusing on their crossovers. They've just done the Aviator and the Navigator. The new Corsair is coming out soon, which is based on the Escape, but also gets the like thorough Lincoln interior update and everything. And that's then the other thing that like it actually feels special inside now. That these new Lincoln SUVs, they'll have a very unique interior with nice materials, cool design, kind of this mid-century, lots of chrome and kind of modern shapes and stuff. It's good looking stuff. I think that's what, and like when you walk into a dealer, that's the first thing that you're going to notice. You're going to sit in the car and you'll be like, ooh, this is really nice. And then you'll be like, take it for a test drive. Maybe it drives like a Ford, but that might not be a bad thing in the first place. And you might not care if you're not really that into cars. So that seems like the good things to do.
And like things like the Aviator, especially with the plug-in hybrid powertrain and you know, as a performance move, not necessarily efficiency, that makes it pretty cool, you know. And I'm excited to see what they do in the future with powertrain development, and I think that could help carry them even further.
I think the trick with the Lincoln 2 is, you know, they need to essentially figure out what their like game-changing thing is going to be. Powertrains could be it. Interiors, I think, actually are.
Yeah,
it's just it's a little
they're killing
tough
it, man.
Their interiors are spectacularly good.
Yeah.
I mean, the Navigator interior.
The top level interiors are.
Indeed,
I'm
yeah.
not sure about. I mean, some of their lower trim levels aren't quite so great, but the Black Label stuff is just phenomenal.
And the thing is, even the base stuff, even if it's not quite as nice on a material front, at least you can tell that you don't have just a Ford with leather.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the key issues on old Lincolns.
Right.
It was a Ford with leather. Like, that is it. And maybe some extra features. So the fact that it actually feels like a different car inside is critical, I think.
So we've talked about the Continental going away.
Right.
I would argue that they should still find a way to keep it. I know it's, in this day and age, sedans don't matter as much, especially for a brand like Lincoln that's just going to try and ram crossovers down your throat, which it should do. That's what the market wants. I still feel like a car like a Continental in their lineup, they don't really need to redevelop this thing. Like, they could let it age for a little bit, keep the interior as gorgeous as possible, let that platform, I don't want to say rot, but, you know, you could use platforms for a long time, especially for that type of audience. I still feel like the Continental is a car that they should find a way to keep.
And powertrain could be a way to do that. I mean, if you could hybridize it, that could take it, you know, another 5-6 years.
Here's something crazy. They still sell the MKZ. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, because that's again like one of the other sort of like leftover models that they're still selling. It is interesting that you can get that with a 400 horsepower turbo V6.
That's pretty wild.
That's a lot in what's basically a Fusion.
Yeah, that's a crazy. Yeah, that is the modern day Taurus show right there.
I think the MKZ is the last car I got a ticket in.
But back on Continental, I think that is a model that they could drop without too much of an issue. Because, I mean, really their flagship is Navigator. That is their image car. It's this big, luxurious, American, soft luxury car. But I do agree with you, Greg, that I think it could make for kind of an interesting sort of niche halo kind of car. Like, if they could update it enough give it like a really special engine, maybe make it like throw like the ultimate black label kind of interior treatment to it. Sort of like that suicide door custom coachwork car.
Make it their Maybach.
Yeah, exactly. Make it like this sort of ultra special kind of like, look at what we can do. Like we can do this.
Exactly.
Think what we're doing for our lower market stuff.
Yeah,
Kind of like the Corvette is for Chevy and NSX is for Honda, that sort of thing. Like it could be a nifty kind of flagship halo vehicle, and being a comfortable sedan would fit with Lincoln's image as like the American soft, comfortable American luxury car company.
Go crazy with the design, show it at Pebble Beach, maybe the New York Auto Show. Make this the car that like celebrities are into. I think there's an opportunity here. Now, is this the most important thing you do? No. This is like sealing your patio and getting new patio furniture after you've done all the other home maintenance. You know, this isn't the first thing you do, but it's a thing I think they could do. And Ford has some money.
I'm actually getting really excited about this idea the more that we talk about it.
All right. So, Lincoln, should we just talk some presidential politics real quick? I'm kidding. Let's not do that. But we should probably spend some money, right?
Yeah.
All right. So today's question comes from the Our Cars thread. I think this is always fun to dive into. This is a good one, too. This is, the question is, I really like the lines on the original Bronco. Yeah, I think we all do. Does anyone make a small, upright vehicle like that these days? Everything seems to be just crossovers or 100-door pickup trucks. Yeah, fair enough. So basically the question now is,
which kind of Wrangler do you want to buy?
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the closest thing to the original Bronco? That's where I would land, or wait for the successor to the Bronco.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. Go buy a Wrangler. That's it. I mean, you can pull the top off just like the original Bronco. It's square like the original Bronco. It's got solid axles front and rear like the original Bronco. It's the closest thing you can get until the next Bronco comes out.
In some ways, the Wrangler could be closer to the original Bronco than the new Bronco.
Possibly.
We don't know as much how far they're going to take it.
That's a good point. It's a shame that we can't get cars like, I mean, the Jimny is way smaller, but that's
and
pretty
not
cool.
available here.
Yeah, but it's a shame that we don't have more options like that. I was just at Bollinger last night.
That's close to the original Bronco.
That's pretty darn close. But that who knows when that'll be available, and that's going to be expensive too. But the new Bronco will probably be out right around the same time. So.
Yeah, and if you've got a little extra money, I mean, there's the Land Rover Defender coming up soon. Yeah, that's roughly $60,000 right there. Which, I mean, you can option up a Wrangler close to that, so it's not necessarily that ridiculous of a price.
That's a good thought. And I mean, there's also plenty of, if you want an original Bronco, there's plenty of like aftermarket shops that will take like an original Bronco, shell or like a rebuilt shell, if you will, and stick any kind of powertrain you want in it. You could have a hybrid or all electric one. Look at Icon. They do some crazy things. The FJ company
those
does
are also
some stuff.
Crazy spendy too.
True.
Even more than a new Wrangler or a Defender.
I think actually the play would be just get like a two-door Wrangler right now. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really pretty much your only option.
Unless you want to wait.
Yeah. And I mean, if all you care about is the style, there's also stuff like the Jeep Renegade that is very boxy and square and upright. That would be a potential option that's a little bit more civilized. But yeah, Wrangler is kind of your only option. Defender's coming out in about a year, Bronco a little bit after that. So depends on if you want to wait or if you want to buy now.
I think we'll leave it there. Please send us your spend my monies. Another great show. Had fun, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get out and enjoy this September weekend, the last one of September, the first full one, I believe, of fall. Hopefully it'll be a little crisper. What are you guys driving? What are you driving this weekend, John?
I'm driving the Audi e-tron, which I'm super excited about.
Get pumped. That's awesome. I drove that yesterday. I need to drive it again, to be totally honest. We'll talk about it again on future podcasts. I think electric cars, you get a little bit of, you get the brakes, you get all the acceleration. it takes a little bit of mental recalibration to like, you need to drive it a couple times before you could totally like weigh in on it. What are you driving, Joel?
I've got the 124 Spider, and I am so stoked. I mean, in case you couldn't tell earlier in the podcast, I love that thing. And boy, even as a Miata person, it would be a really, really hard choice between that and the new Miata.
I'm going to take the Escape Hybrid, which should be, I'm pretty excited. I haven't driven the new Escape yet. The Hybrid I find particularly intriguing. Yeah, we got a lot of good cars this week. So,
I did like that Escape Hybrid.
yeah, I will
Probably talk about that next week.
Yeah.
talk about it next week. All right, so we'll leave it there. Be safe out there. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the drive.